Hello, so let's continue with John 5 verse 30. By myself I can do nothing. I judge only as I hear, and my judgment is judged, for I seek not to please myself, but to him who sent me. So Jesus talks about the Father. He always glorified the Father. He never glorified himself. And we as believers should do the same thing. We should never seek to glorify ourselves. We should always seek to glorify the Father. And Jesus talks about things that he does nothing on his own. He always does whatever the Father does. And Jesus always tries to make himself equal with the Father. And he just carries on. He says that in verse 31, if I alone bear witness about myself, my testimony is not true. So according to the Jewish law, no one could be testifying on their own behalf. So the testimony could only be accepted if you had 3 witnesses, but Jesus uses 4 witnesses, and today I'm going to talk about 3. Verse 32 says, there is another who bears witness about me, and I know that the testimony that he bears about me is true. You sent to John, and he has borne witness to the truth. Now that the testimony that I receive is from men, but I say these things so that you may be saved. He was a burning and shining lamp, and you were willing to rejoice for a while in his light. So he's talking about John the Baptist. So he was the first one who gave testimony. And the other thing that I'd like to mention is Christ talking about the truth. That whatever John said about him was true, but as John the Baptist, but as John said, Jesus himself is the truth. In him there is truth, and there isn't anything about Christ that is not true. And if you recall, I was talking about how modern society tries to reimagine truth, try to twist the meaning of truth and say that truth doesn't exist, which is in itself is a truth claim. So I think it's rather ironic. Verse 36 says, but the testimony that I have is greater than that of John, for the works that the Father has given me to accomplish, the very works that I am doing bears witness about me, that the Father has sent me. So whatever Jesus did, those things that he performed, the miracles, feeding the people, the 5,000, walking on water, raising the dead, resurrecting himself. There's a difference between resuscitation and resurrection, because there's one thing to be resuscitated and then you die later. But Jesus was resurrected, and we are going to be resurrected as well. And resurrection means there's no more death. That's it, death has been done with. So once you've been resurrected, you will never die again. And the other thing he talks about, that when he says John the Baptist, although his testimony was true, the things he's doing bear greatest witness than whatever a person says. And it's the same with us as well, if you think about it. Because when you do something, they're really a testament to your character. So you could say whatever you want to say about yourself. But, and I understand that, sometimes your actions do not reflect your true self, because you could be in a situation where you react in a certain way to things that you wouldn't normally react to. But people who know you, they generally who know about your life, they generally get a pretty good idea about your personality. And verse 37 continues, and the Father who sent me has himself bore witness about me. His voice you have never heard, his form you have never seen, and you do not have his word abiding in you, for you do not believe the one whom he has sent. Now you have to take this verse in context. Everything the Bible is to be taken in context. Because if you take the verse out, says you never heard his voice, then you say, oh, but John, when Jesus came out of the water, you said that this is my son whom I love, with him I am well pleased. But what Jesus is talking about here is, it only makes sense in light of verse 38 when he says, you do not have his word abiding in you, for you do not believe the one whom he has sent. So he's talking about the rejection of Christ. He's talking about the rejection of his teachings. And if you reject Christ, you reject God the Father, and vice versa. So it is the Father who bore testimony about Christ, but people rejected him, and still to the day reject him, because the Jews know and the Jews understand that only God could do the miracles he did. And interestingly, I just finished a book about replying or dealing with rabbinic rejection about Christ or something like that. I'm terrible with titles. But in some of the Jewish text, could be the Mishnah, they are talking about how Jesus performed miracles. Yet they rejected him because they thought that those miracles were performed by Satan himself. But it's interesting that yet in ancient rabbinic times, the Jews understood that only God could do miracles, the one that Jesus did. They just didn't want to accept Christ, like I mentioned it, and I'm going to talk about it. But there was this scientist who said that faith or belief has to do with the will, and you can literally will something. In fact, you can even submit your will not to believe in something you don't want to believe in. So belief is literally the matter of the will. So if you want to believe in something, you can believe in it. But when you reject Christ, you reject it because you don't want it to be true. And it's the same it was the same with the Jews. The reason the Jews rejected it, the whole thing was to do with rabbinic traditions. Because when Jesus came back, he kept roasting the rabbis, he kept roasting the Pharisees. He said, look, you don't follow the law, you follow traditions made by man. And what does it give you? I mean, imagine if the Jewish rabbis had the authority to override law. They could decide over death or life. They could literally decide the fate of people. Who would want to give up this kind of power? And even in the 2nd century period, and if you look at the historians, the writing of the historians, they kept writing about the moral laxity of the Jewish leaders, but also the power they had over people. So it's sort of understandable why they didn't want Christ to be the Messiah, because it would have meant giving up their power. But now, in holding on to their power, they rejected eternity. And I'm hoping that we are not going to make the same mistake, that trying to hold on to whatever freedom we think we have, we reject the only freedom that we could ever have. Amen.